Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, better known as Winston Churchill, British statesman and politician, journalist, writer, honorary member of the British Academy, Nobel laureate in literature, military man, according to a 2002 poll conducted by the BBC Media Corporation. Winston Churchill is recognized as the greatest British man in history. The main quality of this man, in fact, that made him one of the most prominent political figures in world history, was his extremely tough, consistent defense of the interests of his social class and his state. Do not be afraid of the future. Look into it. Don't be deceived about it, but don't be afraid. Yesterday I went up to the captain's bridge and saw waves as big as mountains and the prow of a ship that was confidently cutting through them. And I asked myself, why does the ship beat the waves, though there are so many of them, and he alone? And I realized, the reason is that the ship has a purpose and the waves do not. If we have a purpose, we'll always get where we want to go. Few people know what Winston Churchill had to go through to become one with the English parliamentarians. He established himself not only as a prolific writer, war correspondent and brave cavalryman, but also as an adventurer. His ability to get away with it, to change plans based on circumstances, paved the way to world politics. As a young man, Winston set himself the task of getting into Parliament and persistently pursued this goal. Winston Churchill is widely regarded as the greatest Briton in the country's history. Millions of words have been written about him in books, articles, the press, and Finest Hour magazine, dedicated entirely to his memory and lessons to this day. Winston was born in 1874 into the Spencer Churchill family. The Dukes of Marlborough, who were not only very wealthy and revered in England, but also very famous. Churchill's father, Lord Randolph Henry Spencer Churchill, the third son of the 7th Duke of Marlborough, was a famous politician, a member of the House of Commons from the Conservative Party, and served as Chancellor of the Exchequer. His mother, Lady Randolph Churchill, maiden name Jenny Jerome, was the daughter of a wealthy American businessman. In general, a figure like Winston Churchill is characterized by haste, risk-taking, suddenness, and a desire to do everything on his own without asking anyone's permission. This is eloquently demonstrated by the fact that Winston was born spoiling everyone's plans. The baby was born 2 months before its due date in a hastily decorated bedroom. Born right at the ball. In the dressing room, on coats spread out on the floor. Little Winston immediately firmly asserted his right to his place in the world. Since his adolescence, he was used to stand up for his choice. And despite the many difficulties he overcame in life, managed to become a symbol of an entire era. However, Winston as a child did not have a great desire for knowledge. Learning was not easy for him. Here feats how he wrote later in his memoirs. It was at the lodge for the first time I showed his menacing grin education. Expected the arrival of a terrible person called a governess. The day of her arrival was fixed. In preparation for the event, Mrs. Everest got out a book called Reading Without Tears. In my case, of course, the title did not live up to it. I was indoctrinated to read without crying by the time the governess arrived. We worked hard every day. The nurse used a pen to show me the letters. It was martyrdom. Much training was far from over when the fateful hour of meeting the governess came. I did what hunted people usually do. I went into the bushes. I huddled in the scrub that surrounded the hunter's lodge. which seemed to me like a forest. It was hours before they found me and handed me over to the governess. Again, we were struggling every day, not only with letters, but with words and, worse still, with numbers. Letters needed only to learn. And when they were put together in a certain way, you could recognize their combination of a certain sound or word, and if it really stuck, say it out loud. And the numbers had a very intricate relationship with each other. And they did things to each other that you could never accurately guess. I had to say what they did each time. And the governess always insisted that the answer was correct. If it wasn't right, it was wrong. Almost correct was no good. Sometimes numbers were borrowed from each other. You had to take, or borrow, a number and then return what you took. All these complications cast a persistently thickening shadow over my daily life. Winston Churchill received his primary education at one of England's oldest male-privileged private schools, Harrow School, where he was sent at age 12. In his student days, Winston was a stocky, lumbering teenager with a mop of bright red hair. His teachers spoke with one voice of him as a remarkably incapable child, whose only positive feature was the serenity with which the boy regarded corporal punishment. He stuttered, had a slight lisp which he later got rid of, was stubborn, willful, and restless. He studied poorly and was considered almost the most backward pupil in his class. But it was at school that he developed a love for the English language and poetry. He easily memorized dozens of poems. Already in his youth, Winston had a very strong and brave character, as evidenced by various interesting incidents from his life. Here is one of them. I was 18 years old, enjoying the vacations. My 12-year-old brother and 14-year-old cousin came up with the idea of playing catch-up with me. After running away from them for about 20 minutes and completely out of breath, I threw myself onto the bridge. When I reached the middle of the bridge, I was horrified to find that the pursuers had split up. They were now standing at both ends of the bridge, and there was no escape. In an instant, a daring plan emerged. The cleft below me was covered with young spruces. Their chiseled tops almost reached the bridge. What if I jumped on one and slid down the trunk, smashing spruce paws along the way until they stopped the fall? I asked myself. I took a closer look, figured it out, thought about it, and climbed over the handrail. My young pursuers froze. To jump or not to jump, that was the question. I jumped, opening my arms to the spruce top. My reasoning was right, but my reasoning was bad. Only 3 days later, I regained consciousness, and only 3 months later, I was out of bed. It turned out that I had fallen 29 feet to the ground. Of course, the Christmas tree helped. Hearing my brother's frightened babbling, he jumped off the bridge and won't say a word. My mother rushed to me with urgent help and an unwanted bottle of brandy. My parents had a rule: in trouble and in sickness, to bring in medicine of the highest order, without regard to expense. At my bedside, eminent specialists crowded in. Later, when I began to think again, I was both amazed and flattered to find out what fees they were paid. His father believed that the only suitable career for his son, who in his opinion was not of high intellectual ability, would be the military. Winston did not resist. In 1893, he entered Sandhurst Royal Military College, passing his examinations only on his third attempt. However, He soon became the first student in his course in such subjects as military tactics and fortification and graduated 8th in his class of 150 classmates. Soon after, when Churchill was 20 years old, his father passed away from a serious illness. Winston would later inherit much from his father, which would give his figure a romantic halo. Nevertheless, his father was demanding and cold to Winston. Thus, he felt unspeakable irritation at his son's failure to enter a number of prestigious educational institutions. It is also impossible not to mention the personality of our hero's mother, Jenny Churchill. Subsequently, she will play an important role in the career of her son because of his perseverance, beauty, and connections in English high society. Jenny was considered the most beautiful lady in her district. Soon he was enlisted in the army, and by chance ended up in India, in Bangalore. There was nothing to do there. India annoyed him. He considered Hindus second-class people, and the only distraction was reading. It was there that he realized the pleasure of swallowing hundreds of books. At the same time, he began to write actively himself. Essays, novels, and even an unfinished novel. It was then that he came up with the idea of combining his two favorite things, war and literature, and become a war correspondent. All the years that followed, he spared no effort to apply for combat missions in Afghanistan, Egypt, and South Africa. His descriptions of military campaigns were in demand by Britain's largest publishers. Here's one of his notes. Walking around the world, you'll find it divided mainly into two kinds of people. Those who say, "Why doesn't anybody do it?" And those who say, "Let's see who can stop me from doing it." No doubt it was during these years that he proved himself to be a man of steel rod and great intelligence, which was not at all predicted for him during his studies. After his retirement, he was already famous as a journalist. In addition, belonged to a noble family, which played a role in his later career, for his person began to fight all the political parties in England. In fact, to get such a star, and even a talented person, was not an easy task. The Conservative Party won, and no mistake, a few years later, Churchill was famous for his witty eloquence in Parliament. However, he never betrayed his convictions, and as soon as the political controversy came into resonance with his own views, he immediately switched sides to the Liberals. But he did not immediately show exuberant activity, and this transition was seen as a betrayal. Churchill, on the other hand, sat down to write a family novel, as well as quietly arranging his personal life. Young people, I think, should be as careful about reading books as old people are about eating. You shouldn't swallow everything, and one should chew carefully what one reads. He believed. In India, Churchill did not sit idly by and self-educated, devouring the books and newspapers his mother sent him in packs. He managed to take part in the punitive campaign of the Malacan Corps. Of course, Winston wrote reports and reports from Africa, but now for the Daily Telegraph. Then, in 1897, in a letter to his mother, he declared his firm desire to run for the English Parliament, and he wanted to achieve this by means of military glory, which can be regarded as the right step, because at that time it was the military that enjoyed great popularity when some conflict broke out in the outskirts of the British Empire. After a successful campaign in Egypt, where British troops defeated the Dervish army, Winston Churchill went to South Africa. It could be said that Africa made all of Churchill's later career. It was there that he returned to foggy Albion as a national hero. The fact is that as a war correspondent, sending reports on the course of the Anglo-Boer War, he was captured. The Boers set a cunning trap by which they captured an English armored train, where Winston Churchill found himself. However, he managed to escape from prison at his own risk, crossed the front line, and came to coastal Durban. Many have claimed that when he escaped, he dared to abandon his comrades. But Churchill himself vehemently denied such accusations and claimed that he waited exactly as long as he could and then left captivity. He married at the age of 33, and after 40 years would say, "The greatest achievement of my life is that I finally managed to persuade my wife to marry me." The choice turned out to be perfect. This marriage lasted more than 50 years. They had 5 children, and all her life Clementine Hosier was Churchill's most reliable friend and helper. Churchill's autobiography contains a phrase remarkable in its own way. "Ever since I married, I have always been happy." Winston, did you pay Mr. Monks, the butcher from Westerham who supplies the meat? Darling, I'm trying to save India from Gandhi and his henchmen, thinking how to prevent the fall of the British Empire and how to save the conservatives from disgrace and dishonor. So I didn't pay. I can't do everything at once. After the Liberals' victory, he is closer to power than ever. Churchill had always revered the art of war. A peacemaker is one who feeds a crocodile in the hope that he will eat it last. He often said he was fond of everything that had to do with military affairs. As Minister of the Navy, he suddenly gave a dramatic preference to aviation, which was then just getting on its wings. There is even a legend that he asked the designers to design him a special mouthpiece, so that he could smoke right at the steering wheel of the plane. No one was able to dissuade him from smoking, and his wife despaired of finding burn holes in his clothes and sewed a special bib for him that protected him from ash and fire. In London, Churchill was already known to everyone. All his expeditions and campaigns were described in great detail in the newspapers, and one time the hero's picture appeared in print more than 100 times throughout the year. The publication of books, public lectures, fame, money, and countless awards all served to invite the young politician into the ranks of the Conservative Party. So, in 1899, Winston joins the Conservatives from Oldham and later wins the election, gaining the right to represent the party in the House of Commons. In 1901, he gives his first speech in the same place where his father, Randolph, spoke. Winston was then 26 years old. Churchill's earliest steps in politics are little detailed, taking full advantage of all the connections and opportunities given by fate. The English politician succeeded and eventually entered Parliament. He had a whole life behind him, but a career in politics was already in sight. In the 1950s, Churchill would become Prime Minister of Great Britain. A diplomat is a man who will think twice before he says nothing, a principle of his foreign policy. He would write many books, live to be 90, and be one of the greatest minds of our time. A boy in whose success and knowledge no one believed. Never give up and believe in your strength. Hard work, developing your abilities, developing your memory and curiosity. These are the secrets of success. Read and publish more, write your thoughts and describe your feelings. Memorize quotes from famous people, and achieve, achieve, achieve. Here are just a few of the genius quotes of this great man. Don't be afraid of the future. Look into it. Don't be deceived about it, but don't be afraid. Yesterday I went up to the captain's bridge and saw waves as big as mountains and the bow of a ship cutting through them with confidence. And I asked myself, why does the ship beat the waves, though there are so many of them, and he alone? And I realized the reason is that the ship has a purpose and the waves do not. If we have a purpose, we'll always get where we want to go. You will never reach your destination if you stop near every barking dog to throw a rock at it. You live and create your own world. The richer your imagination, the more diverse your world. When you stop dreaming, the world will end. It's the sweetest thing for a misfit to read a collection of quotes. Once deposited in the memory, quotes give rise to great thoughts. Don't put up with the status quo. For your land and that which fills it. Take possession of your heritage. Make a commitment. Take the time to say no. Don't put up with failure. You will make plenty of mistakes, but by remaining generous, honest, and fervent, you will not hurt the world, not even hurt it badly. It exists for the purpose of being harassed and conquered by the young. Only by submitting time after time does the world live and thrive. Thank you for watching. Love and good luck to you.